Oh, hello there. Right, now, today we're going to have a look at Paper 2, Question 3, Language. Alright, so all that work you've done in literature, learning subject terminology, being able to zoom in what a metaphor or a simile is, knowing what the word types are, all of that stuff's going to come in really handy now. Alright, so without further ado, let's get straight on with it. Alright, so you've been studying a lot of literature, so it should be nice and simple, because what we're just doing is looking at language. So, more importantly, how does the writer use language to describe, in this case, the call tips? Alright, now read the question. You only need to refer to source A, lines 27 to 40. If you do full analysis of anything else other than that, you're not going to get any marks. There's nothing wrong referring to other things in the rest of the text, like a quick link. But if you're going to make a link, just make sure that you don't fully analyse that one. You're just kind of saying, this is backing up my point. Okay, now you can see it's worth 12 marks. It should take about 15 minutes. This is the section we're going to give you. On the mountain above Aberfan, there were 7 such tips. The evening sun sank early behind them. To some of the younger generation, they'd always been there, as though dumped by the hand of God. They could be seen from the school windows immediately below them, rising like black pyramids in the western sky. But they were not as solid as they looked. It was known that several had moved in the past, inching ominously down the mountain. What was not known, however, was that the newest tip, number 7, was a killer with a rotten heart. It had begun in Easter 1958 and was built on a mountain spring, most treacherous of all foundations. Gradually, over the years, the fatal seeping of water was turning tip 7 into a mountain of moving muck. Then, one morning, out of the mist, the unthinkable happened, and the tip came down on the village. The children of Pantglas Junior School had just arrived in their classrooms and were right in the path of it. They were the first to be hit by the wave of stupefying filth which instantly smothered more than 100 of them. Now, what do? First things first, I'll try to have a look at the text and see if I can pick out some techniques. Although we're not going to do this technique-led, we're going to do concept-led, which I'll come on to in a minute. We should be able to just write some down that we think. Now, in this case, I've just done everything by hand because this is the way that I would normally do it. With lots of practice, you might not even need to write down a plan at all, but for the first few times you do it, I would really suggest writing down a plan and having to think about them. So the mark scheme. In order to get top marks, you need to be detailed and perceptive, which means you need to use lots of different pieces of evidence. You need to refer to a range of different quotations and different techniques. And obviously the focus here is language. So all that subject terminology is going to become really, really important to get the higher marks. Even to get into the higher bands, if you use sophisticated terminology, then you're on to a winner. Okay, so this is what I did at first. I read the piece and I said, right, what things could I possibly discuss? So I've got one reference is always been there. Another, as though dumped by the hand of God. Another, rising like black pyramids. Another, inching ominously. A killer with a rotten heart. A mountain of moving muck. And instantly smothered. Now I can refer to all of these, but I haven't got the time in the exam. I've only got about 15 minutes and I can't go into every single detail. So what I did, first of all, was really think hard about which ones I think that I can talk about. The key to this is exploding quotations. Now, we use this in literature all the time, but what does it actually mean? Alright, so ask yourselves these questions. What is the technique? Use subject terminology. What does it actually mean? So can you understand it? Where does it belong in the text? Is it the beginning, the middle, or the end of the extract you're given? Is that important? Maybe it has more effect if it's at the beginning, or the last thing that we think of when we read it. Can you link it to another quotation, or if not more than one quotation? And if it's a Victorian piece, for example, could you refer to the social historical context? Now, it doesn't always work that one, but often that comment could make something a little bit more perceptive. So once I've written down all the quotations I think I could talk about, then I'm very, very quickly going to see if I can explode them. You haven't got a lot of time for this one, to get on with it. So I looked at the top one, always been there. And actually, looking at it now, it looks a bit plain, and I haven't really got time to waste on plain quotations. I've got to be judicious. So I'll go straight to the next one. As though dumped by the hand of God. Now, dumped is a verb, and it suggests something that you would do with rubbish, therefore implying the coal tips are some form of waste product, and by God, some type of God's waste product, so maybe unnatural. Now move on to the next one. Automatically, I'm liking the reference to pyramids. I know a little bit about pyramids, therefore it reminds me of something to do with death, a tomb. Perhaps this is foreshadowing what's going to happen next. Like black pyramids, again, it's a simile, therefore there's a lovely language technique, and even the verb rising suggests something that's growing in stature. So I think that one I'm definitely going to go for. Next one, inching ominously. Now, if you don't know what ominously means, but you think, oh, that's a nice word, don't talk about it. If you don't know what it is, there's plenty of other stuff going on. However, I do know what it means. It suggests that something is about to cause some danger, Inching, almost like something inching forward, going forward very slowly. Could even be linked to some type of a predator or some type of person who's moving very, very slowly. Someone who's quite sinister. So I do like that one. The next one, a killer with a rotten heart. This is the one that really sticks out to me. All right, it's personification, and it suggests that it's murderous, it's malevolent, so it kind of has hatred in it, it's trying to cause harm. Even the adjective rotten, you wouldn't think of a heart as something rotten. It should be something vibrant, something that gives life. But in this case, the adjective suggests decay. Now, we've seen that earlier on in the text, so that's something I'd like to really focus in on. The next one, a mountain of moving muck. I like the example of alliteration. However, could I say a lot about that? Maybe the fact that the M sound elongates it, makes it even slower, more of a threat. But really, I can't really see too much there. Now, the last one, instantly smothered, it suggests something quickly happening. But smothered also, it kind of links back to that killer, idea of being attacked and murdered. So I might use that as a supporting quote. So there, I've decided. I'm choosing as though done by the hand of God, rising like black pyramids, and a killer with a rotten heart. Everything else I might mention if I have time, but they're the main things I'm going to go in for. Alright, so what I've done is I've just broken one down. So a killer, someone who's unempathetic. Obviously in the reader there's a sense of danger, a sense of threat to the people. And as I said before, the word rotten, decay, waste. Even the idea of linking to death. Now the link is smothered. Again, an assailant, someone who's attacking you, might smother someone. Almost like smothering someone in their bed. Attacking someone when they're most vulnerable. And we know these children are very vulnerable because they're only young and they can't see it coming. Okay, now, that's your planning. Now, before we write our main piece, what we're really looking for to focus on is 3 to 4 different features. Now, you could have 2 words that have been used, for example, and zoom in on word choice. You could have 2 techniques, maybe a simile, a metaphor, an example of a hyperbolic statement, something like that. But really, I think 3 very good squee paragraphs will stand you in good stead. Now, just to remind you, squee paragraphs, they're not full analysis, but it's really looking at what's being inferred. So, you're making a statement, nice and clear, concept-led, come up with an idea, not just a method. Then we're looking at quotation, use some subject terminology, so what technique is being used. Then look at what's being inferred. So you could use phrases like, this reminds me of, this suggests that, this implies that. Then talk about the intent, what is the writer getting up to, why are they doing it? And finally, have a little look at the impact. That means, how does the reader feel about what's being described? Okay? Right, I know there's a lot of information. Maybe replay that little bit if you want to go over it again. Okay? Thought about it? Right, let's move on and get it written. Alright, so before I write my sample response, I just want to remind you and myself about what question 3 is all about. So you have 12 marks, approximately 15 minutes to plan and to write it and to proofread. You need lots of posh terminology. So yes, using verbs or nouns or adjectives is good, but if you could use something like, I don't know, zoomorphism, similes, any type of imagery, it needs to be detailed, at least 4 to 6 quotations, and zoom in. Don't write a huge long quotation. Look for a key word, zoom in on that and fully explode that one. Next one, make links, supporting quotations, even if it's just one word to support it, like I said earlier on with smothered, that would be nice for an examiner to see that you're making links with different sections of the text. Try to deal with the whole section referenced. If you just deal with the first 2 sentences, for example, then they'll kind of assume that you haven't read the whole thing. So try and pick some different points right the way through the extract that you're given. Now, if it's a Victorian text, perhaps you know something about the Victorian era, the idea that they loved science, that technology was moving forward. In this case, it's not a Victorian piece, so I can kind of miss that one out. And the big one is perceptive comments. They rock my world. I want some really interesting things to be linked. I want you to think about the overall big picture of what's going on. How does the community feel? How does the reader feel? So here's my example. Sorry about the handwriting. The writer uses language to portray the coal tip as a threatening presence in the small Welsh community. Significantly, the tip 7, I was going to write the tip number 7, but I forgot. It's alright, is personified as a killer with a rotten heart, which immediately creates a sense of peril, or danger, in the fact that it appears to be a callous, so uncaring, unempathetic force which is capable of taking life and causing utter decay, rotten. The tip, therefore, becomes an almost satanic figure, slowly creeping, inching, towards its victims, the community. The association with death is reiterated with the use of the simile rising like black pyramids, which have connotations of funerals and death tombs. The verb rising suggests that the tips are growing in stature and are omnipotent in their environment, so they're completely in charge. Moreover, the adjective black, directly related to mourning and death, also implies a shadow looming over the town, blocking out all hope and life. Now, when I reread this, I see that I haven't specifically said the word the reader. However, by talking about death and the effect on the town, then hopefully it's being implied. If you're uncomfortable with that, just add another comment about the reader. Now, this is an example from the exam board. This was a top mark. The writer uses language to describe the coal tips as dark, dangerous and sinister for the reader, and in doing so makes effective use of personification to single out coal tip number 7 as a killer with a rotten heart. Here, the emotive adjective rotten creates the impression of a malevolent being. This is because rotten can have several connotations, but all of them are negative. For example, it makes a link for the reader with decay, death, and just as importantly, is suggestive of evil intent. It is as if it sets out to deliberately kill the children. This is further added to by a verb phrase inching ominously, which suggests ongoing movement, slow, imperceptible, but inevitable, and the adverb ominously forewarns of the disaster to come. The writer appears to draw on conventions of the horror genre to pull the reader into his account. It has a clear villain and set of victims. I often find one of the most powerful things to talk about language is what does it remind you of? So a killer with a rotten heart is a character you might see in the horror genre. It might be a moment in an extract where everything's going wrong, things are falling down. So it could have connotations of, I don't know, like a slapstick comedy or something like that. Again, it's trying to add that perceptive comment in. As you'll notice as well, it's offering examples. We're using discourse markers. I think in mine I use a few more, such as moreover, for example. But don't be scared of using them. Draw ideas together. Alright, and that's about it. Key things to remember. You want to talk about the connotations of every single feature that you pick out. You also want to be judicious. Don't try to do too many, but don't then again just pick anything that's right in front of you and say, I'll just do the first couple of lines, because that's not going to be the best you can do. Really get something you can sink your teeth into. Oh, and finally, don't forget, there aren't any writing marks. So although I'd always encourage you to really focus on your spag, you don't actually get any marks for this one. Alright, so if you're going to kind of stress over how to spell hyperbole or how to spell zoomorphism, don't bother. As long as you've got the concept alright, you'll get the marks. Alright then, good luck!